At first, I thought I was just overthinking things. I told myself it was work stress, the kids keeping us awake at night, or maybe just the usual ups and downs of a long-term relationship. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was something beneath the surface that I couldn't quite identify. Jessica and I had been married for 13 years. We had two wonderful kids, Alice, who had just turned 11, and Levi, our 7-year-old whirlwind of energy. Life was hectic, but generally good. The usual pressures, mortgage payments, homework struggles, juggling work, were always there, but we had always managed to deal with them as a team. Or so I thought. It started off small. Jessica became more distant. She stopped laughing at my jokes, the ones that used to make her roll her eyes but secretly smile. Our conversations became routine. Did you pay the water bill? Don't forget Alice's soccer game at 4. Gone were the late-night talks about our dreams or memories of happier times. The warmth between us had faded, replaced by an unsettling coldness. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a phase. One night, as we were lying in bed, I asked, "Hey, you okay?" She was scrolling through her phone, her face lit up by the screen. "I'm fine," she replied curtly, not looking up. "Just tired." But I could tell fine didn't mean fine. It felt like there was an invisible wall between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through it. Then the irritability set in. Everything I did seemed to annoy her. If I loaded the dishwasher, it was the wrong way. If I offered to help with the kids' homework, I was interfering. If I asked her to join me for a movie or dinner, she would sigh and say she was either too busy or not in the mood. It was like walking on eggshells in my own home. The kids noticed it too. Alice, ever aware, asked me one night, "Dad, is Mom mad at you?" Levi, on the other hand, was just hoping for someone to play video games with him. I reassured Alice that everything was fine, but inside, I was starting to doubt that myself. One Saturday morning, I decided to confront her. I was in the kitchen making pancakes for the kids, and Jessica was sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone as usual. "Jess," I said carefully, "is everything okay between us? You've been distant lately." She looked up at me, her face unreadable. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I replied, setting the spatula down. "You're distant. You're always on edge. Did I do something to upset you?" I asked, my voice soft, trying to approach her. She sighed heavily, almost like the conversation was an inconvenience. "I'm just stressed, Austin. Work's been crazy, and I'm trying to manage everything at home. It's not about you." "Then let me help," I said, offering a hand. "You don't have to do it all on your own." I said I'm fine, she snapped, grabbing her coffee and walking out of the room. I stood there, stunned, while the sounds of the kids laughing in the other room only highlighted the tension hanging in the air. For the next few weeks, nothing got better. Jessica's mood swings became more pronounced, and her emotional absence was noticeable. She started working late more often, claiming she had deadlines. When she was home, she was glued to her phone or holed up in our bedroom. The warmth we once shared was replaced by a cold, unapproachable distance. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself sitting alone in the living room. Jessica had gone to bed early, or at least that's what she said. I stared at the family photos on the mantle, vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. They felt like memories from a different life, a life I was desperate to get back. I needed someone to talk to, so I decided to call my sister, Carmen. She'd always been the person I could rely on for honest advice, without any judgment. The next day, during my lunch break, I called her. "Hey, Carmen," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course," she replied, her voice calm. "What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain the strange distance between Jessica and me. "It's Jessica. Something's not right. She's been distant and moody, and I don't know what's going on." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Carmen spoke again, her voice was firm, but caring. "Austin, have you thought that maybe there's something she's not telling you? Maybe you need to dig a little deeper." Her words hit me like a cold wave. I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt they planted wouldn't leave my mind. That night, after Jessica went to bed, I found myself sitting in the living room again, staring at her phone on the kitchen counter. I had never been the type to snoop, but something in me snapped. I reached for her phone, my hand shaking as I typed in the passcode, her birthday, and unlocked it. What I found on that screen changed everything. My heart raced in my chest as I stared at the messages. Jessica's phone felt heavier in my hand than it ever had before. Part of me wanted to put it down, to pretend I hadn't seen what was on it. But I couldn't. But there was another part of me, The part that couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion, that pushed me to keep going. I opened her messages. At first, most of them seemed innocent enough. Routine chats with her mom, a group conversation with her coworkers, a few reminders to herself. Then, I saw a name I didn't recognize. Kane. The last message was from earlier that day. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Usual place. My stomach dropped. I clicked on the conversation. It was a mix of short texts and longer exchanges, none of which left room for any doubt. One read, "You looked amazing last night." Another one said, "I can't stop thinking about you." Her reply, "You're sweet." I scrolled down. Each new message felt like a punch to the gut. They had been meeting for months. Coffee dates, late-night rendezvous, excuses about work trips. It was all there. A damning record of betrayal. I dropped the phone onto the table, my mind racing. How could she do this? To me? To our kids? To the life we had built together? The thought of her with another man, sharing the moments that should have been ours, made my chest ache with a pain I couldn't shake. I barely slept that night. I replayed every interaction, every time she'd been cold or claimed she had to work late. It all made sense now, though I wished it didn't. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had changed. She breezed through breakfast, barely acknowledging me or the kids before rushing out the door. "Love you." I called after her, testing the waters. Her response was automatic, almost robotic. "Love you too." Alice looked up from her cereal. "Dad, are you okay? You look sad." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." But I wasn't fine, and I couldn't keep pretending. As soon as the kids were off to school, I called Carmen again. "Carmen, I need your help," I said, my voice shaky. "I think Jessica, she's seeing someone else." Carmen didn't ask if I was sure, or suggest that it might just be a misunderstanding. She simply said, "I'm coming over." An hour later, Carmen was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I handed her Jessica's phone, still open to the messages. She read them in silence, her face growing darker with every word. "Austin," she said finally, her voice filled with sympathy, "I'm so sorry. This is awful. What do I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Do I confront her? Do I just pretend I don't know?" Carmen shook her head. "You can't ignore this. But before you do anything, you need to protect yourself, your kids, your finances, everything." "How?" I asked. "First, you document everything," she said firmly. "Take screenshots of those messages. If you decide to confront her or go further, you'll need evidence." I nodded, my hands trembling as I grabbed the phone again. I took screenshots of the texts and saved them to a hidden folder on my computer. Carmen watched me, her face a mix of concern and resolve. "You also need to know the full story," she said. "Do you want me to help you find a private investigator?" The thought of hiring someone to dig into Jessica's life made my stomach turn, but Carmen was right. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Let's do it." Carmen made the calls while I sat at the table, numb. An hour later, she had an appointment set up for me with a detective named Matt Bootman. "He's discreet and professional," she assured me. "He'll get you the answers you need." That evening, Jessica came home later than usual. She didn't offer any explanation, and I didn't ask. Instead, I focused on the kids, helping Alice with her homework and playing video games with Levi. I wanted to keep things as normal as possible for them, even though my world was crumbling. Jessica barely interacted with us. She ate dinner in silence, then disappeared into the bedroom, claiming she had a headache. I watched her go, my jaw clenched with frustration and hurt. The next day, I met with Matt Bootman. He was all business, no nonsense, the kind of guy you'd want on your side when things got ugly. I told him everything, from Jessica's behavior to the messages I had found. "I need to know what's really going on," I said. "I can't make any decisions until I have the full picture." Matt nodded. "I'll take care of it. It'll take a few days, but I'll get you answers." As I left his office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Part of me hoped Matt would come back with nothing, that this was all just one big misunderstanding. But another part of me knew better. Jessica's betrayal was real, and soon, I would have to face it head on. The realization hit me like a freight train the day after my meeting with Matt. No matter what answers Matt brought back or how clear the picture became, I couldn't see a way to stay in that house. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the suffocating atmosphere, the endless pretense, and the fact that every inch of the home we had built together now felt tainted. That I needed space. Space to think, to breathe, and maybe to heal, though I wasn't sure that last part was even possible. That night, after the kids went to bed, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the packed duffel bag at my feet. I had thrown it together hastily, a mix of clothes, toiletries, and a few things for the kids. Carmen had offered to take us in until I figured out what to do next. She had a spare room and, more importantly, an open heart. Jessica had gone to bed early, as she had been doing a lot lately. I could hear the shower running upstairs, her nightly ritual before retreating behind the closed door of our bedroom. I didn't say goodbye. What could I even say? I know about Cain. Or thanks for destroying everything we had. No, it was better this way, clean, decisive, and without the messy drama I'd been caught in for weeks. I scribbled a quick note on the back of a grocery receipt and left it on the kitchen counter. Jessica, I need some time. The kids and I are staying at Carmen's for now. Please don't contact me until I'm ready. Austin. My hand shook as I set the pen down. Even that small message felt like more emotion than she deserved. I grabbed the bag, tiptoed upstairs, and gently shook Alice awake. Sweetheart, wake up, I whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, a frown forming as confusion took over her face. Dad? What's going on? We're going to stay at Aunt Carmen's for a little while, I said, brushing her hair back. Pack a bag, okay? Just the things you really need. She frowned, but didn't argue. Alice had always been the more intuitive of my kids. Even if she didn't fully understand, she must have sensed something was wrong. Next, I woke Levi. He grumbled and protested, but I managed to get him into his shoes and jacket. I carried his small backpack downstairs as he stumbled behind me, still half asleep. Alice joined us a few minutes later, her favorite stuffed animal tucked under one arm. We slipped out the front door quietly, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on my chest. The drive to Carmen's house was silent, broken only by Alice's occasional sniffle. I wanted to say something to reassure them, to make them feel safe, but I couldn't find the words. How do you explain to your kids that their family is falling apart without breaking them in the process? When we arrived, Carmen was waiting on the porch. She enveloped me in a hug as soon as I stepped out of the car, her warmth cutting through the numbness I had been feeling. Come on in, she said softly. You're safe here. She helped me get the kids settled into the spare room, where Alice and Levi promptly fell asleep again. Once they were tucked in, Carmen and I sat in the living room. She handed me a mug of tea, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to exhale. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice full of concern. I shrugged. I'm not sure. No, mostly angry and guilty. I hate that I'm putting the kids through this. Don't blame yourself, Austin, she said firmly. You're doing what you need to do to protect them, and yourself. The guilt didn't ease, but I nodded anyway. We talked for a while longer, mostly about logistics, what I needed to do next, how to handle things with Jessica when the time came. Carmen, ever the pragmatist, promised to help me navigate it all. The next morning, Jessica called. Her name flashed on my phone screen, and I felt a wave of nausea. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. Austin, where are you? Why did you leave? Call me. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. My first instinct was to reply, to demand answers, to unload all the hurt and anger I had been holding in. But Carmen's words echoed in my mind. Take your time. Don't let her rush you. So I put the phone down and walked away. Jessica didn't deserve my response. Not yet, and maybe not ever. For now, my focus was on Alice and Levi. They were my priority. Everything else could wait. Later that day, Matt called. His voice was calm, but serious. Austin, I've got some updates. Can we meet? Yeah, I said, swallowing hard. When? Tomorrow morning. My office. It's a lot. You might want to bring someone with you. I hung up, the weight of his words sinking in. Whatever Matt had found, it was the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it, but I knew I didn't have a choice. The truth was coming, whether I wanted it or not. The morning of the meeting with Matt, I barely touched my coffee. Carmen offered to come with me, but I declined. This was my burden to bear. I needed to face it alone. The drive to Matt's office felt surreal, like I was moving through molasses. My mind was a whirlpool of anxiety and dread. What would he tell me? Could it be worse than what I already knew? Part of me hoped for a miracle, that this was all just some horrible misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. Matt's office was a modest, unassuming space in a strip mall. The blinds were drawn, and the air inside smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Matt greeted me with a firm handshake and gestured toward a chair across from his desk. He sat down, a file folder in front of him. "Thanks for coming in, Austin," he began, his tone measured. "I've gathered enough to give you a clear picture of what's been going on. I want to warn you, though. It's not easy to hear." I nodded, my stomach tightening. "Go ahead. I need to know." Matt opened the folder and began laying out photographs, printouts of text messages, and receipts. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. Jessica and Kane were sitting at a cafe, leaning in close. Her smile was one I hadn't seen in months. The next photo hit me like a punch. Jessica and Kane were holding hands, walking into what looked like a hotel. Matt's voice was steady as he continued. "They've been meeting regularly for about 6 months, mostly at this hotel and a few other spots around town. These receipts confirm it," he added, sliding a copy of a hotel bill toward me. The dates matched nights she had claimed to be working late. My hands shook as I held the paper, the final nail in the coffin of my trust. The betrayal was undeniable now. Matt didn't stop there. I also managed to get some correspondence. He slid over printed screenshots of messages between Jessica and Kane. They were explicit, filled with declarations of love and plans for a future together. "I can't believe this," I muttered, my voice cracking. "She's been lying to me this whole time, to our kids." Matt's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Austin. I know this isn't easy, but at least now you have the full picture. You can decide what to do next." I stared at the evidence spread across the desk. There was no denying it anymore. Jessica had destroyed our marriage. And for what? Some fleeting thrill? The thought made my blood boil. But as much as I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, I knew I had to keep my composure. For Alice and Levi, if nothing else. I took a deep breath, then asked, "What would you do?" Matt hesitated before replying. "I can't tell you what to do, Austin. But if it were me, I'd talk to a lawyer. Make sure you and the kids are protected. And I'd take some time to process everything before confronting her." I nodded, the lump in my throat growing. "Thanks, Matt, for everything." He walked me to the door, his hand firm on my shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Austin. And remember, you're not alone in this." As I drove back to Carmen's, the weight of what I'd just learned settled over me like a storm cloud. I wanted to scream, cry, punch something. But when I walked through the door and saw Alice and Levi playing on the living room floor, I forced a smile. They didn't need to see my pain. Not yet. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Carmen and I sat on the porch. I told her everything Matt had shown me, my voice shaking as I recounted the details. She listened in silence, her face betraying a quiet fury. When I finished, she spoke, her tone firm. "You need to talk to a lawyer, Austin. First thing tomorrow. You can't let her walk all over you. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about Alice and Levi, too." I nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. I couldn't let Jessica's actions ruin our kids' lives. They deserved stability, love, and a father who would fight for them. The next morning, I made the call. The lawyer, a woman named Millie Anderson, listened patiently as I explained my situation. "You've already taken a good first step by gathering evidence," she said. "Now we need to focus on protecting your rights and ensuring the best outcome for your children." Her confidence was reassuring, a beacon of hope in the chaos. We scheduled a meeting for later that week to discuss the next steps. Meanwhile, Jessica's calls and texts kept coming, a mix of confusion and anger. "Austin, why are you doing this? What did I do? Please talk to me." I ignored them all. I couldn't face her yet, not without a clear plan. The truth was, I didn't trust myself not to explode if I saw her, and I couldn't risk saying something that would jeopardize my case. Carmen stepped in to help with the kids, keeping them occupied and shielding them from my growing turmoil. She was a godsend, her steady presence a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. As the week wore on, I began to see a path forward. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. But for Alice and Levi, I would find a way to rebuild without Jessica. My focus had shifted from what I'd lost to what I still had. 2 amazing kids, a supportive sister, and the resolve to build a better life for all of us. The day I decided to confront Jessica, my emotions swirled together, anger, sadness, and even a hint of guilt, as I prepared for what was bound to be one of the hardest conversations of my life. The evidence I'd gathered was undeniable, and while part of me dreaded her reaction, another part was desperate to finally release the storm I'd been bottling up inside. Carmen had offered to keep Alice and Levi for the evening. You need to do this without the kids around, she'd said firmly. They don't need to hear this yet, I agreed, grateful for her unwavering support. As I left her house and drove toward what used to be my home, 1,000 scenarios played out in my mind. Would Jessica deny it? Would she break down and apologize? Would she try to blame me? I wasn't sure which outcome I was bracing for, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation anymore. When I walked through the front door, Jessica was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. The sight of her going about her routine as if nothing had changed ignited a spark of anger in me. Austin, she said, looking up. Her tone was cautious, almost wary. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you. I set my bag down and took a deep breath. We need to talk. Her expression shifted, confusion giving way to concern. What's going on? Why did you take the kids and leave? You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I couldn't hold back the bitterness. Explain what, Jessica? That you've been sneaking around with Kane for months? That you've been lying to me? To our kids? To everyone? Her face went pale. The knife slipped from her hand, clattering onto the cutting board. Austin, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I snapped, my voice rising. I pulled out the folder Matt had given me and tossed it onto the counter. It's all here. The texts, the photos, the receipts. I know everything, Jessica. Everything. She stared at the folder, her hands trembling. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again. But then her shoulders sagged, and tears filled her eyes. Austin, I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. What exactly did you think would happen, Jessica? You've destroyed our marriage. You've shattered our family. How could you do this to us? She wiped at her eyes, her voice shaking. I don't know. I was lonely. You were always working, always busy. I felt invisible, Austin. Kay made me feel seen. The words stung more than I'd expected. I'd sacrificed so much for our family, working long hours to provide for them, and this was my reward? Betrayal? Do you even care about what you've done to Alice and Levi? I demanded. Do you have any idea how this will affect them? Of course I care, she cried. I love our kids. I never wanted to hurt them. But you did, I said coldly. And now, because of your choices, they're going to grow up in a broken home. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Jessica's quiet sobs. I wanted to feel sympathy for her, but all I could feel was anger and disappointment. I'm filing for divorce, I said finally, my voice steady. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm going to fight for custody of the kids. They deserve stability, and right now, you can't provide that. Jessica's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic. Austin, please, don't do this. I can fix this. We can fix this. Just give me a chance. You had your chance, I said, shaking my head. You threw it away. I turned and walked out, leaving her standing in the kitchen, her sobs echoing in my ears. As I got into my car and drove back to Carmen's, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The confrontation was over. The truth was out. Now, it was time to focus on the future for myself and for Alice and Levi. The truth about Jessica's affair had been devastating, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. For weeks, I'd managed to push the name Kane to the back of my mind, avoiding any deeper exploration into who he really was. It was enough to know that he existed, that he'd been the catalyst for the collapse of my marriage. But as the divorce proceedings moved forward, curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. One afternoon, while the kids were at school and Carmen was out running errands, I sat down with the file Matt had given me. I hadn't looked at it since the night of the confrontation, but now, I felt compelled to know. Who was this man who'd come into my life and taken everything from me? I sifted through the photos and receipts, pausing at one image that showed Kane's face clearly. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. His features were average, brown hair, clean-shaven, early 40s. He looked like a regular guy, someone you'd pass on the street without a second thought. But the nagging feeling persisted. Then I found it. A printed email exchange between him and Jessica. My eyes skimmed the text, and at the bottom, there it was, his full name. Kane Dowman. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Couldn't be. I stared at the paper, willing it to say something different. But the letters didn't change. Kane Dowman. A name I'd known for years. Kane wasn't just some random guy. He was my coworker. The realization sent a wave of nausea through me. Kane and I weren't close, but we'd worked together on several projects over the years. We'd shared coffee breaks, swapped stories about our families, even attended the same company holiday parties. I trusted him. Hell, I'd even introduced him to Jessica once at a work event. Had it started then? Had he looked at my wife that night and decided she was worth betraying me for? I slammed the folder shut, my hands trembling. My mind raced, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Kane, searching for signs I might have missed. Had he ever dropped hints? Made offhand comments? I couldn't think clearly. The anger was too overwhelming. Carmen came home a little while later, finding me pacing the living room. "Austin? What's wrong?" she asked, setting down a grocery bag. I stopped, struggling to find the words. "It's Kane," I said finally. "The guy Jessica, the guy she's been seeing. I know him. He's my coworker." Carmen's eyes widened. "What? Are you serious?" I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "I've worked with him for years. I even introduced them once." I had no idea. My voice trailed off as the weight of it all came crashing down again. Carmen's face darkened with anger. That piece of garbage. How could he do this? He knew you. He knew your family." "I don't know," I said, sinking onto the couch. "But I can't let this slide. He's been sitting across from me at work this whole time, acting like nothing's wrong. Like he hasn't destroyed my life." Carmen sat down next to me, her hand gently resting on my shoulder. "Austin, you need to be careful. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't do anything rash. Think about Alice and Levi. They need you to stay focused on them, not on that scumbag." Her words grounded me, but only slightly. I couldn't just let this go. Kane needed to know that I knew. That his betrayal hadn't gone unnoticed. And Jessica, she'd hidden this from me, knowing full well who Kane was. That betrayal cut even deeper. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. Every time I passed Kane's desk, a fresh wave of anger surged through me. He sat there, oblivious, typing away on his computer like nothing was wrong. It took everything in me not to confront him right then and there. But Carmen's voice echoed in my head, "Be careful." Instead, I waited until the end of the day. As people trickled out of the office, I approached Kane's desk. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Hey, Austin. What's up?" he said casually, as if we were still friends. I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "We need to talk." He frowned, confusion evident in his expression. "About what?" "You know damn well about what," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jessica." His face went pale. He glanced around the office, then back at me. "Austin, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I know everything, Kane. The texts, the meetings, the hotel. I know it all." He stammered, his facade crumbling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Save it," I said, stepping closer. "You looked me in the eye every day, knowing what you were doing. You lied to me to my face. Do you have any idea what you've done to my family?" Kane's shoulders slumped. "Austin, I'm sorry. I don't." I interrupted, my voice icy. "You don't get to apologize. Just stay the hell away from me. From my kids. From everything. If you come near us again, I'll make sure you regret it." He nodded, his head hanging low. "I understand." I turned and walked out, my heart pounding. The confrontation hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd hoped for, but at least I'd said my piece. As I drove home to Carmen's, I felt a grim sense of closure. The betrayal had come from within my own circle, but now I knew the truth. And with that knowledge, I could finally start to rebuild. After my confrontation with Kane, the anger didn't subside. If anything, it burned hotter. I couldn't shake the feeling that both he and Jessica had escaped too easily. They had shattered my life, and all I had done was tell them to stay away. It wasn't enough, not for what they'd done. I wanted them to feel the pain I was carrying. And so, the idea of revenge began to take root. It started small, with Kane. I knew his routine, his habits. He wasn't particularly careful about keeping his personal and professional lives separate. Over the years, I'd overheard him boasting about his achievements and skirting office protocols. He prided himself on being indispensable, but I knew better. Kane had skeletons in his closet, and I planned to expose every single one. Using what I already knew and doing a little digging, I uncovered questionable expense reports he had filed, fake invoices, and emails that hinted at conflicts of interest with clients. I compiled everything into a neat folder, adding my own account of his unprofessional behavior over the years. Then I anonymously sent the entire dossier to our company's HR department and copied the CEO. Within days, the fallout began. Kane was called into a series of meetings. Rumors swirled around the office as his usually confident demeanor crumbled. By the end of the week, he was escorted out of the building, his belongings stuffed into a cardboard box. Watching him leave, his head hung low, brought a grim satisfaction. It wasn't enough to undo what he'd done to me, but it was a start. Jessica was next. For weeks, she had continued calling and texting, alternating between apologies and accusations. I ignored most of her attempts, but one evening, I decided it was time to respond. "Jessica," I texted. "If you want to talk, meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the coffee shop by the park." She replied almost instantly, "I'll be there." The next day, I arrived early, taking a seat in the back corner where I could see the entire room. Jessica walked in a few minutes later, her face a mix of hope and hesitation. She spotted me and hurried over, sitting across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been wanting to explain." "Don't," I interrupted. "This isn't about explanations or apologies. I've heard enough of those. This is about accountability." Her expression shifted, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You've been lying to me for months, Jessica. You tore our family apart, and now you expect me to just forgive you? Pretend it never happened? That's not how this works." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers will be finalized soon, and I'm fighting for full custody of Alice and Levi. You can have supervised visitation, but that's it. They deserve stability, and you've proven you can't provide that." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Austin, please, don't do this. I made a mistake, but I love our kids. You can't take them away from me." "You took them away from yourself," I said coldly. "When you chose Kane over your family, you made your decision. Now you have to live with it." I stood up, throwing a few dollars onto the table to cover the coffee I hadn't touched. As I turned to leave, Jessica reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "Goodbye, Jessica," I said without looking back. Walking out of that coffee shop felt like shedding a heavy weight. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. Jessica and Kane had both paid a price for their betrayal, and while it didn't erase the pain they'd caused, it gave me a sense of justice. At home, Carmen greeted me with a knowing look. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's done," I said simply. "Now it's time to focus on Alice and Levi. They're all that matters." Carmen smiled, pulling me into a hug. "You've got this, Austin, one step at a time." As the days turned into weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, I felt like I was moving forward. And that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, the dust from my marriage's collapse began to settle. Life wasn't easy, but it was becoming manageable. My focus remained on Alice and Levi, who were adjusting to the new normal better than I could have hoped. Carmen continued to be a rock for us, providing stability and encouragement when I needed it most. Jessica's attempts to reconcile grew less frequent, though she continued to plead her case during supervised visitations with the kids. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, trying to convince me that we could repair what had been broken. But her words fell on deaf ears. I'd moved past the point of forgiveness, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Kane, on the other hand, disappeared entirely. After his firing, he left the city, and I hadn't heard from him since. Knowing he was out of my life brought a sense of relief. I no longer had to look over my shoulder, wondering if I'd run into him in the office or around town. The legal battle for custody was grueling, but Millie, my lawyer, was relentless. With the evidence of Jessica's affair and her lack of stability, the judge granted me primary custody of Alice and Levi. Jessica was given limited visitation rights, a decision that she protested but ultimately had to accept. When the court ruling was finalized, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. It wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was a life I could rebuild. Carmen and I celebrated that evening with a quiet dinner at home. Alice and Levi were in high spirits, sensing the relief that permeated the air. As I watched them laugh and play, I felt a flicker of hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "You're doing a great job, you know?" Carmen said as we sat on the porch later that night, the kids asleep upstairs. "I'm just trying to get through each day," I admitted, sipping my coffee. "Some days are easier than others," she smiled. "That's all anyone can do. But you're not just surviving, Austin. You're building something new for you and the kids. That's worth celebrating." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I'd been consumed by anger and heartbreak, focused on what I'd lost. But Carmen was right. I had an opportunity to create a better future. one where Alice and Levi could thrive. And that's exactly what I intended to do. I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I started volunteering at Alice's school events, coaching Levi's soccer team, and taking the kids on weekend adventures. We visited parks, went hiking, and even took a road trip to the beach. Each memory we created felt like a step toward healing. Professionally, things began to look up as well. Without Ken at the office, the atmosphere improved dramatically. I received a promotion that came with a raise, allowing me to provide more for the kids and secure a new place for us. It wasn't a grand house, but it was cozy and filled with love. Everything we needed. One evening, as I tucked Alice into bed, she looked up at me and said, "Dad, I'm glad we're here. Feels like home." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As I closed her door and headed to my own room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time, I felt like we were on solid ground. Together, we were moving forward, one step at a time. Life after the chaos felt strangely liberating. For the first time in years, I could focus on myself and the kids without the constant undercurrent of suspicion or betrayal. Slowly, I started rebuilding not just our home, but the trust and joy I'd once thought were lost forever. Carmen's unwavering support never wavered. She pushed me to step outside my comfort zone, encouraging me to reconnect with old friends and even explore new hobbies. At first, it felt unnatural, as if I were forcing myself to enjoy things again. But over time, it became easier. I enrolled Alice and Levi in art and music classes. Seeing their excitement over learning new skills was infectious. Alice developed a love for painting, her room quickly filling with colorful canvases that reflected her vivid imagination. Levi, always full of energy, took to the drums, his rhythms filling the house with life. For myself, I joined a local running group. Started as a way to clear my mind, but it quickly became something more. The camaraderie of the group reminded me of what it meant to share life with others, even in small ways. My stamina improved, and with it, my confidence. One day, Alice asked me why I'd been smiling more lately. "You just seem happier, Dad," she said, her big eyes searching mine. Her words gave me pause. I realized she was right. The weight that had once crushed me was lifting, replaced by a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. "I think I am happier," I admitted, pulling her into a hug. "And a big part of that is because of you and Levi. You guys keep me going." The days turned into weeks and then months. Our little family grew stronger, our bonds tighter. The betrayal that had once defined us became a distant memory, replaced by the life we were creating together. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.